Hotep, it's your brother Beniti Amin Ray. Uh, Back from taking a couple week break from as we took from the radio show and from doing some of these classes due to some traveling and some speaking engagements we had for the new year. But we're back. So before we begin, obviously want to wish everybody Happy New Year. When according to the Gregorian calendar, 2016. It's a new year. Along with that new year is going to come some drastic change on all levels that we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. So we are back from our couple week break. If you do follow the radio show, we will be back on the air this Thursday night, January 7th, continuing our discussion on the chakras and raising the kundalini. We'll be talking about that this Thursday night. So we'll be back doing that this Thursday night. What I want to kind of talk about tonight for a little bit, since we're in the new year, we're in 2016, and as I said, we have to have change, and that change comes with the mindset that we think. And fortunately, in 2016, as we are now in, according to the Gregorian calendar, obviously, we can get into the whole time debate thing if we're going with a solar calendar or lunar calendar or the Egyptian calendar of the Theyre or the calendar of the Aztec or the Mayans or the various different Native American calendars. We're going to get a calculation of different years where we're just using, when we say 2016, the Gregorian calendar so we can keep track of their false time and how it aligns with our false time. With our true time. Moving forward into this year, unfortunately, the first step of change, and one thing that I see in my 20 plus years of teaching, interacting with people, talking, doing classes, lectures, etc., I still see people stuck in the mind state of this God and devil concept that we're gonna kind of completely dispel the myth of that. The God and devil concept is a fragment of your imagination. Okay? This is the barrier, or this is one of the key blockages, consciously and subconsciously, that are blocking people from growing and reaching their spiritual potential. We have to understand the major religions, and when I say the major religions, I mean Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, were a product of or a representation of the outer manifestation of what's actually going on within you. This God and devil concept is a representation of what goes on inside of you every day. Now, it was reflected physically in these literal writings that men wrote and created, all these stories that are centered around good and bad, God and the devil, heaven and hell, judgment, is basically describing that internal war that goes on in you every day. It doesn't exist. This is what we mean when we say it doesn't exist outside of yourself. It's a fragment of the imagination of the mortals that created these stories. So this whole concept that there's a God in the heavens and that there's some devil beneath the surface in hell, and you're going to go to one of those places depending on how you live your life, is a fragment of your imagination. You continuously enforce that belief by the very power you give those thoughts. It's not real. It's not a reality. Now, other than just saying it, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that profess it and say it verbally, but they are not really accepting it internally. And here, in the emotional heart chakra center, which is how you feel the divine love, the divine presence, or the essence of the true self, which taps you in to every aspect of the vibratory nature of creation. You're not feeling it here. You're professing it here, but it's not here, nor is it radiating from your pineal gland and outpouring and outflowing from your crown chakra. So people are professing it, but they're not really accepting it within. Now, it's been a systematic way of thinking. It's been a systematic way of indoctrination for thousands of years. And as we know, these ideologies were enforced upon mortals, as I've said a million times before, to keep us controlled in a state of fear and to keep your emotions under lock and key so you can be dictated to, what to do, how to move, how to react, etc. Now, until you actually accept the fact within that there is no God, there is no devil, you are the God and the creator that is dictating your destiny and your evolution and the creation of that evolution by the decisions that you make. Okay, so what you accept and receive mentally and reciprocate back out, you are shaping and molding your destiny. So if you believe in your mind, or you accept this whole kindergarten fairy tale concept that there's a God and a devil, you have now, by that thought process, have begun to judge yourself, because you've accepted this system of ideology, because now your behavior and your actions will now go in line with that thought process. You start to second guess decisions you make. You start feeling guilty about certain thoughts that you have, about certain things you set out to do, based on that judgmental process that's been instituted by these systems of indoctrination called religion. One can never reach their divine potential if they still believe in this foolish ideology. When you see the representation of creation, okay, we can go back to the story of the chaotic waters of Nun in ancient Egypt. Let's start there. This is your creation story, and out of this story comes the fabricated myths. When you get into your Bible stories, especially the first several chapters of Genesis, which are a combination of Egyptian symbolic creation stories, Babylonian and Sumerian creation stories, as I've said before, you'll find out what we're calling the so-called Bible today was first kind of grafted and put together during the time when you read the book of Ezra. When Ezra and those people of the lineage of Ezra, who the Bible falsely calls Israelites, made their way back into Jerusalem after they were released from so-called captivity and slavery. Some majority of those Israelites decided to follow Ezra back in Jerusalem so he could rebuild Solomon's temple. Some stayed in Babylon because they found a good life there and they didn't want to leave that lifestyle and go and restart again. Read the book of Ezra. It tells you that whole story. And the story will, as we explain later, as we've talked about in the past, who the Israelites were. We know what that story really represents when you go back into the mysteries of ancient Egypt. But we'll get into that maybe another time or a little further. But we're using the point in time of origin according to historical aspects of biblical timelines when this Bible was put together. Now, when these people were in bondage in Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar, this is where they encountered the Sumerian creation stories. This is why when you read the book of Genesis, you will see so much similarities between the Sumerian creation story and how it kind of connects almost identically to those stories in the Gilgamesh epics, the Atrahasis, and the various different Sumerian or cuneiform tablets. So when they came back into Jerusalem is when mortals started first compiling or putting the so-called Bible together. So the creation stories were fabricated from these myths. So you're seeing in these stories, for an example, as I mentioned a minute ago, the chaotic waters of Nun, which represents what goes on in the womb of the female. It talks about how when a man ejaculates inside of a woman and the sperm is released, you have billions and millions of sperm fighting to get to the ovum of the female. Only one makes it. But those dark, chaotic waters and that state of nothingness was represented in the womb of the female, explaining the evolution of how human beings, or how the first original beings came about on the planet. They would take that story and correlate that, for an example, in the book of Genesis when it says the Spirit of God roamed upon the face of the deep, or on the surface of the water. You'll read that in the very first couple of lines of Genesis. Now, again, that's just one small portion or extract that they've taken from these creation stories. I'm just using that as one example. I don't want to get into a whole creation story. We know it's fabricated. We know they stole these stories from the Egyptian text, the Sumerian text, even some of the Native American text. For an example, the flood story can be found in multiple African cultures, not just in the Sumerian culture. You find it in the Egyptian text. You find it amongst the Yoruba. There's a whole story of creation when you read how the Orishas and Father Obatala and Orula created the planet. Very, very similar to these creation stories you read. So you'll see they're all in line and have familiarity and similar aspects to those stories. But these were all, again, a representation of what was going on within you. You are the God or the deity that's driving these creative forces. You are the one that is controlling these energies. It's how you choose to exercise and put these energies into practice dictates and shapes the very universe, the very multiverses that you, as this God or goddess, is just trying to create. This is the mindset that one has to think when really understanding their existence and their role in their very existence. Okay? And I have to again refer back again to the 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti, and the very first one, the doctrine of mentalism, which we talk about all the time. All is mental, mental is all. Your very thoughts form, shape, and create your universe. Another symbology of that concept, when you go into the story of the deity Patar, some say Tar, some say Pat, just depends on how you pronounce it, or whatever, as long as you understand we're talking about the deity Patar. Let's look at some of these symbolic systems of creation that tie into what's existing or going on within you. Now, in the story of how Patar came about or came into being, and this is a powerful symbology, this is a powerful representation, and I don't hear enough of people elaborate on this, people that teach on the Egyptian mystery system per se. I don't hear enough of detailed elaboration on this, and this is important because what it says in there is that Patar brought himself into existence by way of his thoughts. Okay? Now, phonetically, we know thought, or the scribe, phonetically is the Greek aspect that ties into the phonetical name of Thoth, or the deity Tahuti, the scribe. But the powerful symbology in that concept that he brought himself into existence. Now, what did that mean? It doesn't mean poof, he snapped his fingers and he appeared. What it's trying to correlate is before anything comes into existence physically, it's formulated on the vital life force or ether plane. Then the thought is formulated on the mental plane, and then those thoughts are brought into existence physically. So it has to be brought in from the mental plane right before it's brought in on the physical manifestation, on the physical realm. That's powerful. Now, why is that powerful? Now, let's correlate that to us in this day and time. You've heard me say a multitude of times in various different classes, you become your thoughts. What you think, you become. Now, this is powerful. What you think, you become. So if you start thinking and believing that there's a God in heaven and that there's some devil beneath you in hell, you start really giving energy to those thoughts, and you start making that a reality to you. Doesn't mean it's a reality to everybody else around you, but you start wholeheartedly accepting that belief. And it's just a belief. It can't be confirmed or proven. It's a personal belief that you decided to accept. The more you accept it, the more thought you give it, the more power you give it, and it becomes a personal reality to you. Now, again, let's not confuse that for being a reality to others. And this is why people that are beyond that way of thinking can't relate, and people that are stuck in that way of thinking get frustrated and want to get angry and debate with those individuals that don't believe or accept like that. This is the reason why those energies conflict and don't mesh or get along well. So you become your thoughts. You give those thoughts power by accepting what you personally believe is real or not. This is what this is based on. Now, the individuals over the course of many years throughout history knew this, and they knew if they came up with a system of control which was fueled by the emotion of fear, they knew this would be a dominating system to keep people under wraps, keep people under power, to keep people under control. Now, as I've said today, even to this very day as we're speaking now, religion is the main fuel and component that is fueling, even if people are hiding behind it and using it as a force, it's fueling every conflict worldwide. You can travel all over the country, not just the Middle East, all throughout Africa is being destroyed and plagued by religion, or the individuals choosing to use religion as a tool to spread their death and destruction. This is why I keep telling people that are on this Go Back to Africa trip, stop the bullshit, because Africa, as I've mentioned before, is in much more horrible shape than what we're so-called dealing with here in America. And it's not good here in America either. But you got majority of Africa has been infiltrated by Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And as I've said before, places like Liberia, Nigeria, just to name a very small few, are indoctrinated by these religions. Let's not paint this picture that everything in Africa, it's the motherland, and they're perfectly in tune with our original way of life. You're fooling yourself if you think that. And I keep telling people, if that's the case, stop sitting here complaining and bitching in America that this is Babylon and the land of the beast. I just tell these fuckers, get on a plane, leave now. What are you waiting for? Stop talking about the shit, because these are people that just like to hear themselves talk and like to hear them talk all this pro-black African shit, but yet they never want to act on it. You know, they want to play African here in America and put on African clothes and dashikis, and they want to get up there and give lectures about how bad America is, where if they did that shit in those countries, they would be shot or put to death, because they wouldn't have this freedom of speech as we have here and we can do now. We can bitch and complain about shit. We can point out shit is wrong. You can't do this openly in those countries because they have their own rules. I mean, they have their own systems of authority and power. And it creates a sickness in the minds of these individuals, where if we think that this thought process of God and the devil is powerful here, and these fuckers are on a whole nother level over there. They're fanatical about it. They're fanatical to the point where they create laws in their politic and governmental system where they're justified in killing you if you don't believe the way they believe. So this fuels the fire and the sickness globally. And this is why I said, as we approach now in 2016, the powers that be, when I say the powers that be, I'm talking about the people that accept these ideologies. They're getting more fanatical about this. And what it's doing is shaping the hearts and the minds of the individuals that accept these ideologies. And we see the byproduct and the result of what this is causing. And how we can overcome this adverse effects. And it is an effect that's creating a sickness in us mentally. And that sickness spreads emotionally and sometimes to the point physically, where it affects the body physically. We can control and change that. This is why you keep hearing me say, you have to make the change within. I think one of the last posts we did on the last, I don't know if it was the last one or the one before that, sparking that alchemical change within. You have to make the change within. Once you accept that you are that spiritual force, that energy life force that is dictating your destiny, that by the multitude of decisions, by what you accept as a divine reality and what you accept as fictition, you are that God that is creating your very own universe, whether you're conscious of it or not. All this is internal, and it exists within. This is not going on outside of yourself. It's creating the illusion that it is. And the powers that be are creating the illusion that this whole system of creation is existing outside of yourself, as if it's being controlled by some external force. And that's just not the case. So if we don't get over this hump moving forward, and unfortunately, as we are now in 2016, people still struggle with this. Okay, and I'm not just talking about people that are stuck in religion, who believe in this God and devil concept. I'm talking about people that claim to be spiritually conscious. They're still stuck there, and most of them are stuck there on a subconscious level where they're not aware of it. But you can usually see that, and you can usually identify it by their actions and their behaviors. You can tell if you've been studying long enough, or you have sharpened your spiritual senses. You can smell them a mile away. The actions and the behaviors usually will dictate where this person's mindset is. So we have to get by this hump. There's no other alternative around it. One cannot move forward in the process of spiritual alchemy per se and evolve into that change that one needs to become, because this energy has created huge blockages for people that is stunting their spiritual growth. And 9 out of 10 times, and again, in my many years of talking with people, dealing with people, etc., I still find when we probe and we dig deep, this is the problem per se that's holding them back. They're still stuck in that mindset. Excuse me. They really don't believe that they are the ones. They are their own creator, that they're creating their destiny. It's hard for them to fathom and comprehend that something that wasn't outside of themselves, some force or some spirit or some deity called God, Allah, Jehovah, whatever the fuck you want to call him. And who said it was a he anyway? It's a whole nother story. It's hard for them to accept the fact that there's no God controlling all this shit. It's just hard for them to accept it, because you gotta understand, most of us, when we were born and raised as kids, majority of us, if you were the one that was fortunate, maybe you were never brought up in a systematic indoctrination of any of the three major religions. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you were fortunate. I mean, I have met some that were not, but it's very far and few between. But for the most part, majority of us were raised under one of these three major religions. Now, this is something that starts at a very young age. We were indoctrinated with this at a very, very young age. Now, here's one way of grasping this concept that I keep telling people. Now, let me give you an example. At some point, when we reached a certain age, somebody sat us down and told us about this fictitious concept of God. It could have been your mother, it could have been your father, your auntie, your uncle, sister, whatever. Somebody sat you down, just like they do most kids with Santa Claus or any other fictitious character. Somebody sat you down and had to tell you who and what God is. At that very moment in your existence, this is where that system of indoctrination started to begin, at that point in time. Now, I bring that up because, now if that happened at whatever age you were, 3, 4, 5, whatever age it is, prior to that individual sitting you down and teaching you about who and what God supposedly was, the question I would always ask that individual is, did God, did he, it, she exist or not prior to before that person sat you down and told you who and what God was? Now, when you think about it for a minute, obviously the answer would be yes. Of course, the Creator always existed prior to that, because the Creator was you. But most people will get stunted on that, and they'll sit there and they'll think. Some will actually say no. Some will actually say yes. No, only in the sense that you may not have been conscious of it mentally. Okay, that would be the only way you can say no to that question. But the Creator always existed, because you are a manifestation physically of that vital life force or that energy that permeates the planet and the multiverses and the universe, that cosmic consciousness. You are a physical manifestation of that. So the Creator has always existed. You are a representation of that. So you have to learn to tap into the ability of the divine consciousness, the cosmic consciousness, as it's called, the divine intellect, the mental reservoir that permeates, that everybody has the ability to tap into. Because you're not going to find the answer. Because, see, people get stuck in this because they're always trying to put a time frame on this shit. They're trying to find a beginning. And that's where people get fucked up and they get confused and they don't figure it out because they're trying to find a starting point to something that has always existed and doesn't have a starting point. Now, the other problem that tends to come in there, as I mentioned, I believe in the last class I did a few weeks ago, people are trying to define the creator based on a three-dimensional existence, person, place, and thing. They're trying to confine what this concept of creation or creator is and define it by person, place, or thing. You can't do that shit. That's the problem. Because the answer to that question is outside of a three-dimensional existence of person, place, and thing. It goes back to the quantum or the square, even beyond that. Now, when we deal with the quantum or the square, we're dealing with four. We're dealing with the square. This is true masonry. We're dealing with the science and the principle of the square or quantum, the four corners of the lodge, or as the Masons would say, stand firm on your square. Now we're getting into quantum and metaphysics, which now takes us outside of person, place, and thing, okay? And now we're starting to tap in to the frequencies and the vibrations of the spiritual realm. Now, quantum deals with four. I hope everybody's paying attention to this shit. Four tied into, at a point in time, where most scientists thought quarks, quasi, four, that the atom was broken down into four particles, and they thought that that was the smallest particle in dealing with the atomic structure or creation. Then they found out those quarks got divided into fours, into biaps and zeals, and it never ended. It kept going back. They found out quarks, biaps, zeals, all this can keep being separated and keep going back when now we're dealing with what we call infinity, never ending. And this was what scientists term tapping into the spiritual realm. And I'm bringing that up because there is no beginning, there is no end. You cannot destroy energy, okay? And this is why when you deal with the concept of God and devil, these are just different representations of energy, okay? And either one can take on the form of being good or bad for you at a certain moment in time. What do I mean by that? We got to get out of the aspect of thinking there's a such thing as good and bad, because again, as we said, back to the 7 Hermetic principles, these are just different degrees of vibration. They vary. What you might call a devil force or an aggressive energy might be needed at certain points in dealing with certain situations, and vice versa. You might need that God energy that religion defines, or that good energy, but in essence, they're all one and the same. They come from the same source. They're just varying degrees of vibration. So there is no beginning, no end. There is no such thing as good or bad. They're just varying degrees of vibration. One has to understand this to understand creation and to understand the fictitious concept of this God and devil. These are just a manifestation of the different energies that exist within you and how you bring those energies about. That's what this is talking about. That's it. It's not really that complicated. It's not really that deep. But one has to understand this concept to really move forward and to really understand how things are systematically lined up for you. It's important because if one wants to move forward on the alchemy or the alchemical path, or what we call the occult path, and as we said, the word occult just means hidden, that's all it means, and one wants to really start working their spiritual magic, one has to understand these concepts or their magic is rendered ineffective. You can't work spiritual magic and still believe in that God and devil mindset. It just doesn't work. Because what a magician is doing when they're manipulating the subconscious mind, they're tapping into certain energies and frequencies that go beyond the realm of faith and belief, that have a metaphysical explanation in their workings that ties into science and creation. And one has the ability, by raising their vibration, to tap into those forces, as we said, to bend that force or energy to work for the benefit of you. That's the science of this. So you can never, ever, ever get past the true understanding of creation and self until you alleviate your subconscious mind of this nonsense and bullshit, of this good and bad stuff, God and devil. Okay? And this is what we mean when we've said, you've heard me say it here in these classes here. You've heard me also say it, me and the brothers say it on the Awakening Universal Minds radio show. You have to go back and address the trauma on the subconscious mind, because you'll find this is one of the key components that we're talking about right now that is a serious blockage for people. And it has to be addressed. So that's what we need to be aiming for as we move forward into 2016. If we want to bring about that alchemical change, if we want to bring about that transformation, if we want to do what we're always talking about, people use that term, taking it to the next level. Well, we got to start doing it and bringing it into fruition and bringing it into action by way of self. Nobody's going to do it for you. You understand? Nobody's going to come with any manual and put it in front of you. And you're going to think that that's going to make it happen for you, or that change is going to come about based on those precepts. Fooling yourself. Okay? What I want to close with, and to establish this in people's minds, now we in 2016, and I want people to understand another year that our planet is closer to the sun. Another year that you're going to see radical change. Not because it's anybody bringing that change upon themselves. It's, again, a combination of nature changing and the planet changing, and individuals either understanding that change and working along with it, or those that are adverse to that change and are being affected by it on a mental and a spiritual level that would be adverse, and that representation of that adverseness that's existing within them is by their actions. These are your people that are picking up guns and shooting people. These are the people that can't deal with hardships. These are the people that get terminated from their jobs, and now they can't deal with reality and they go ballistic and pick up a gun and start shooting people. These are your people that are stuck in fanatical belief systems, such as your terrorists and your idiotic Muslims that are going all across the planet, thinking that by them picking up a gun, shooting and killing people, that it's their fake fucking God Allah that doesn't exist that's doing it for them. There's nothing more ignorant than watching a video of some crazy ass Arab Muslim shooting somebody and yelling Allahu Akbar, God is great. It's the stupidest shit when you really put it into its proper place. But unfortunately, you got idiots like that believe that they're actually being inspired by their fake pagan God Allah that doesn't exist. That's giving them the ability to do this. This is the sickness that this God and devil concept creates within us. So as we move forward in 2016, for those that are not in sync, it's not going to be a good year for you. There's no other way I can sugarcoat it. For those that are heightening their spiritual powers, sharpening their spiritual tools, the spiritual warriors, because like I said, we're at war. There's a spiritual war going on this planet. If you've raised yourself up, you can see it. You can tap into it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, sorry to say you're one of those people that's stuck like Chuck. The time is now. That's the best thing I can say, because this is going to be a rough year for some people. It's not going to get easier, so I don't want to paint a sugar-coated picture of it. But again, if you're not understanding or grasping anything that I'm saying in this video, then whether you're conscious of it or not, you're part of the problem. Okay? And as I said before, as we move forward in 2016, gone are the days of the conscious pimp. Gone are the days of these organizations with one supreme leader. If you're still stuck in that shit in 2016, I really do feel sorry for you. And like I said, for going on almost 26, 27 years, I've sat and talked with everybody about every topic that you can pretty much fucking think of. And that's still some of it I don't get. Why people want to continue to argue this God and devil concept. And I don't care if you're pushing a black God, a white God, a Chinese God, the shit is all relevant. You have created that concept. Every race, for the most part, unfortunately, it's not black Americans, because most black Americans or melanated Americans have everybody else's God. They don't have their own shit, for the most part. But most people on the planet reflect God at whatever their race is. Of course, when you go into the Asian culture, the Asians make their God or deities look like themselves. If you go into the Arab world, same thing in the Arab world. If you go all over Africa, all over Europe. But the problem is when you come to America, melanated Americans, for the most part, are pretty fucked up because they accept everybody else's shit. Now, I bring that up because bottom line is, whatever God you're pushing in whatever race and nationality is a byproduct or a fragment of your imagination. You made it that way. That's not what the creator looked like. It's easy for any race to just say, God is this if you're black. God is this if you're white, if you're whatever. I don't give a shit what culture it is. But to be stuck in that stupid idiotic ideology and debating that shit is irrelevant in 2016. Unfortunately, you got a lot of cats out here that still want to get on, like I said, want to get on YouTube and do all these lectures on this black and white shit, and they're focusing and over intellectualizing on the physical aspect of things, but nobody wants to talk about alchemy and magic or voodoo or black magic or ancestral worship. And most of them are claiming to be connected to their ancestors, but I don't see any of that shit. And when I shift the conversation in that route, then I see a lot of moosing and I see a lot of jumping, and I see a lot of people want to just still get stuck in book knowledge. Now, if that's your thing and you want to debate history and books and who was first and who was original and who was black, that's fine. And we accept that. We know who the original people of the planet was and is. But am I going to spend my whole precept and energy on that? No, let's move forward, because true change is going to come spiritually first before it happens physically. It's not going to happen physically first. And until we get back to the root of our higher spiritual sciences, none of that shit's going to change. I don't care what anybody says. So you can sit here and debate and over intellectualize shit all day. Shit is irrelevant. Something to think about. So this is kind of the mindset we need to have moving forward in 2016. Also would like to send a thank you out to all those that came out. If you're watching this video and you were one of the participants of the drum ritual that we had on December 26th for the winter solstice, nice drum ritual, some nice intense drumming, biorhythms of the drum, obviously creating those vibrations and frequencies. If you're in tune with it, we will be doing one for every solstice and some others in between. Many different ritualistic aspects that we can do individually and collectively to raise this spiritual vibration, to tap into this energy, and that's the plan moving forward in 2016. So again, that's the mindset we want to be on. Some food for thought. I think we're going to stop there. So remember, this God and devil concept is just a fragment of your imagination. You created it, you fueled it, you gave it life. You also now have the ability to destroy it completely and take sole responsibility for your destination, and not dictate your power and your ability and put it in the hands of others who can systematically control you. You got to give all that shit up. If you believe that you are God and you are the creator, and when I say God and the creator, don't define that by the monotheistic definition of what God is. Then you're going to get even more fucked up. You're not going to understand what this is really all about. But anyway, again, back on the air this Thursday. Awakening Universal Minds radio show will be back on the air this Thursday night, January 7th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking about the Kundalini and raising the Kundalini and by way of the chakras. We're going to continue that discussion this Thursday night. We'll have some upcoming events. If you need to contact me, you can contact me by way of email, khnum19@gmail.com, for any questions or comments. If you are interested in this upcoming year for any of us to come to do any live lectures or classes, you can contact us again at that same email, and we could definitely set that up. That goes also for any spiritual consultations, spiritual readings. If you want to work on, setting up your altars, if you want to work on setting up your sacred space, if you want to focus on a specific topic or something that might be plaguing you, or holding you back, I should say. I don't want to use the word plaguing you, etc. All that can be done too. Other than that, that's all that we got for this week. So we'll see you on the next week post. And this is your brother Beniti Amun Ray checking out, saying Hotep, peace, and we'll see you next time.